She was a billionaire with everything, until a boy with twin babies stopped her in the rain. That is how the headlines would have written it, if anyone had been watching closely enough to understand what really changed that night. But stories like this one do not begin with cameras. They begin with glass towers, quiet guilt, and a woman who forgot that once, long before the money, she had been somebody's frightened child too. The night it began, the city was wrapped in the kind of rain that does not ask permission. It fell hard and clean, drumming on the roofs of taxis, streaking down the mirrored faces of skyscrapers, rinsing neon into long blurred veins of light. From the top floor of the Viridian Hotel, the rain looked almost decorative, like a special effect added to someone else's movie. Up there, above 30 stories of steel and glass, wealth had a way of making even the weather feel optional. Evelyn Marks watched it with the detached attention of a woman who had seen every kind of storm except the one that mattered. The conference had run late. Crystal glasses lined the table behind her, half full of wine chosen more for its price than its taste. Laughter still floated in from the adjacent ballroom, carrying words like acquisition and expansion and the tired little jokes people make when they are afraid of silence. She stood at the window, alone in a white suit that had never seen public transport, bare feet pressed into a carpet handwoven in a village whose name nobody in that room could pronounce. Her shoes lay abandoned near the door, heels tilted at angles that suggested they were tired of pretending wealth did not hurt. Down below, the city shone. The Viridian logo glowed like a new moon on the building across the street, one of many that bore her name. She had built them, or at least signed the papers that allowed other people to do the building. Hotels, residential towers, retail plazas. Viridian meant comfort, security, and a kind of polished efficiency that made guests feel important and employees feel replaceable. People called her the Queen of Glass. They meant it as a compliment. Evelyn's reflection nodded back at her from the window. The woman in the glass was elegant, contained, mid-50s with the kind of face that made surgeons greedy. Her hair, a silver darkened at the roots, was swept back in a style that said I do not have time to experiment. A small scar along her jaw, barely visible under makeup, was the only thing her stylist had not managed to smooth away. That scar was old, older than the money, older than the first hotel. She did not touch it anymore, but she knew exactly where it came from. Behind her, a male voice spilled through the door left slightly ajar. Someone laughed about a deal closing in Singapore. Someone else toasted to another quarter in the green. Her name rose and fell, followed by phrases like she is ruthless and she is brilliant and she never lets anything get to her. They were wrong about that last part. Things got to her all the time. She had simply learned how to keep the evidence private. Her phone buzzed on the side table. How to keep the evidence private. Her phone buzzed on the side table. A notification, a news alert about flooding in low-lying neighborhoods on the other side of the city. Another alert, internal memo, cost-cutting proposals for Viridian Care, the charitable wing of her empire that handled housing stipends, medical grants, and other things designed to make wealth look like mercy. Evelyn opened the memo. Her CFO had marked 3 programs for review, which was a polite word for slow, quiet death. Among them, a pilot scheme offering rental guarantees for families on the verge of eviction. The numbers were underlined, the phrases high risk and low return scattered through the paragraphs like tire spikes. She read it twice, then let the phone screen dim. On nights like this, with rain running down the windows like the city was trying to wash its own face, it was easier to think only in numbers. Numbers did not cry. Numbers did not ask why you chose a marble lobby over an unpaid bill. Numbers did not leave at 19 with a suitcase and a sentence that still echoed in the hollow of her ribs. I cannot keep living like your backup plan, Mum. It had been 10 years since her daughter walked out. 10 years since the slammed door, the arguments about missed recitals and late-night meetings and the slow, corrosive way priorities rearrange themselves when money becomes a god. 10 years since she had seen that particular mixture of hurt and disbelief on someone's face. Evelyn had tried to fix it the only way she knew how. Deposits into an untouched account. Voicemails that began with, I am sorry, and ended with calendar invites to dinners that never happened. On the night of her daughter's 22nd birthday, she sat alone in a restaurant she had bought just to have somewhere quiet to wait for someone who never came. You cannot buy back time, her therapist had told her gently. She had not fired him for saying it. That was progress, she supposed. The door behind her opened another inch with a soft protest of hinges. jasmine scent slid into the room, the same perfume her assistant wore to remind the world that she was not just a calendar in heels. "They are asking if you will say a few words before they pour the dessert wine," Nadia said, voice low but bright. "Sponsors from Dubai are here, and the mayor's aide. They want photos with you in front of the new model." Evelyn did not turn from the window. "The model of what?" "The Harbor Line Tower expansion. The one with the rooftop garden, and the infinity pool that overflows into the other infinity pool." Nadia hesitated. "Are you feeling all right?" "I am fine." The words came out as they always did, neat, practiced. "Tell them I will be there in 5 minutes." Nadia's reflection joined Evelyn's in the glass. Dark hair, intelligent eyes, a suit that was 2 pay grades above what her salary should allow and yet somehow looked earned. "You know you do not have to stay," Nadia said softly. "Your speech is already printed. I can read it. Nobody would print it. I can read it. Nobody would blame you if you went home. Blame is cheap." Evelyn allowed herself a small, humorless smile. "I do not miss obligations." "That is not true." Nadia's gaze flicked to the rain, then to the unreadable set of her employer's face. "You miss things all the time. You just do it in the direction nobody sees." Evelyn could have snapped at that. Another boss might have. But she had long ago decided that if she was going to pay for someone's intelligence, she might as well tolerate its honesty. 5 minutes, she repeated. When Nadia left, Evelyn peeled herself away from the window. She slipped her feet back into the heels, adjusted the cuff of her jacket, and smoothed a non-existent wrinkle from her sleeve. Movements as precise as child's play performed by someone who no longer remembered what play felt like. In the ballroom, applause rose like a rehearsed tide when she walked in. The band paused. Cameras lifted. The giant banner behind the podium displayed a glossy rendering of a new Viridian development, glass and light and a rooftop view of a city pretending it belonged to everyone. Her speech lay on the podium, printed in neat, dense paragraphs, words about opportunity and vision and the importance of building for the future. She delivered it flawlessly, her voice calm, her timing perfect, each sentence polished to the kind of shine that makes people forget to ask any real questions. They called her inspiring. They called her a role model. Several young women approached afterward to ask how she had done it, as if there were a single recipe for turning scarcity into excess. Discipline, she told them. Sacrifice. The ability to say no when everyone else expects you to say yes. She did not mention the nights sleeping in her car outside classes, the days working 3 shifts, the first time someone called her a vulture for buying a failing building and raising the rent. She did not mention the girl who learned to translate hunger into ambition, and never stopped to ask what might have been lost in the conversion. By the time she escaped, it was close to midnight. The rain had intensified, thick ropes of water dropping from a sky that looked tired of holding itself together. Nadia offered to have a driver bring the car around, umbrella already half open. "Do you ever get tired of this?" Evelyn asked as they waited under the awning. The rain hit the pavement so hard it bounced, misting their ankles. "Of what?" "Of nights that all feel the same." Nadia's gaze slid to her. "I grew up in a 1-room apartment over a kebab shop with a leaky roof and a television that spoke only when it wanted to. If this is repetition, it is nicer than the kind I knew before." Evelyn nodded, slightly chastened. She understood that. She just did not always remember it. Wealth had a way of breeding amnesia where gratitude should be. The car, a long black sedan with windows tinted to the shade of forgetfulness, pulled up. The driver sprang out with the reflexes of someone evaluated partly on how quickly he could keep rich people dry. He opened the rear door. Warm leather air washed out. "Home, Ms. Marks." She hesitated. Her penthouse was a 15-minute drive away, perched on the lip of the river like a crown that had gotten bored and sat down. Inside waited a decanter half full of scotch, 3 unread books, and a piano she had bought during a phase when she thought she might learn to pass loneliness into music. She had not touched it in months. "Take the river road," she said as she slid inside. "I want to see what the rain looks like down there." The driver merged into traffic, wipers working furiously. The city at street level was a different animal than the one that sparkled under her penthouse windows. Down here, puddles gathered at uneven curbs, swallowing cigarette ends and discarded receipts. People hunched under umbrellas that bowed under the weight of water. Neon signs flickered uncertainly, humming with effort. Evelyn watched it all pass, forehead leaning lightly against the cool glass. She told herself she was studying the way the water slid down the surfaces of her buildings, making mental notes about drainage, facade maintenance, the efficiency of gutters. In truth, she was watching faces. At a red light, the car slowed. The driver's hands relaxed on the wheel. On the corner, a newsstand hunched like an old man in a plastic poncho, its newspapers turning limp at the edges despite the layers of tarp. A bus roared past, sending a wave into the air that crashed against the curb and splashed the ankles of 3 teenagers sharing a too-small umbrella. She almost missed him. It was the movement that drew her eye. Not the frantic wave of someone begging loudly, but the careful, contained motions of someone trying not to be seen and needing it desperately at the same time. He stood near the mouth of an alley, one foot on the curb, one in the gutter, as if undecided whether he belonged to the street or the shadows. Rain soaked his hoodie so thoroughly it clung to his shoulders like another skin. His jeans were the kind that had been new once but had learned to kneel on concrete. He could not have been more than 15-16 at most. In his arms, one on each hip, he held 2 very small bundles. Twin babies swaddled in mismatched blankets, their faces barely visible under knitted caps. Rain dotted their cheeks, the drops there indistinguishable from the milk-drunk tears of infants on the edge of a cry. The boy shifted his weight, swaying slightly the way people do when they are trying to comfort a child without having the energy to walk. His lips moved, perhaps humming, perhaps praying. Every now and then, he lifted his chin and looked toward the stopped cars, eyes scanning faces through windshields, searching for something that did not live in coins. He was not holding a cardboard sign. There was no cup on the sidewalk, no outstretched hand. His hands were full, fingers splayed to keep the baby steady. The only thing that spoke for him was fingers splayed to keep the baby steady. The only thing that spoke for him was the scene itself. 3 figures under a sky that had forgotten mercy for the night. "Do you want me to go around?" the driver asked, misreading her silence. "There is another route, less traffic." She did not answer. The light changed to green. The driver eased his foot onto the gas. The car began to move. And then, for the first time in a long time, Evelyn Marks felt something in her chest override the habits that had been keeping it quiet for years. "Stop," she said. The word came out sharper than she intended, slicing through the soft purr of the engine. The driver braked, surprised, the car jerking slightly as water fanned out around the tires. Evelyn's heart knocked once hard against her ribs. She did not yet know why. She did not yet know that the boy's face, turned up toward the rain, carried shadows that belonged to someone she had failed long ago. She only knew that for reasons she could not name, she could not keep driving past him as if he were just another part of the storm. Outside, rain fell harder. Inside, her hand reached for the door handle, fingers trembling in a way they never did when signing deals worth billions. The boy shifted again, drawing the babies closer to his chest as a truck thundered by, sending a splash toward them. One of the twins let out a thin, exhausted cry that cut through the night like a wire pulled too tight. Evelyn took a breath that felt like a decision. The car door opened to the rain. Rain greeted her like a truth she had been avoiding for years, cold, insistent, and unwilling to let her stay spotless. The wind caught the edge of her jacket, pulling it back like a curtain, revealing a woman not quite ready for the scene she was stepping into. She lowered her head against the downpour, but it didn't matter. The sky was intent on soaking every inch of the moment. The boy didn't see her at first. He stood with his back to traffic, shoulders curved inward to shield the babies from the wind, the way people instinctively protect what doesn't belong to them but feels like theirs anyway. His hoodie clung to him, drenched in heavy fabric plastered to skin like a punishment he'd grown used to. Water streamed down his arms, running over his knuckles and slipping into the folds of the thin blankets wrapped around the twins. Evelyn paused a few steps away. Up close, the scene unfolded with details the car window had blurred out. The trembling beneath the boy's jaw, the way his lips had turned a dusky shade from cold, the faint tremor in his hands as he rocked the babies with a practiced rhythm that did not match his age. He wasn't begging. He wasn't even looking for charity. He was simply trying to keep the rain from choosing the twins before the morning did. She cleared her throat lightly, the smallest sound, but in the hush between thunder rumbles it was enough to make him look up. His eyes, large, dark, and startlingly alert, flicked over her face, her hair, the tailored suit quickly surrendering to the storm. He didn't step back or forward. He held ground like someone who'd learned that moving too quickly could startle help into disappearing. "You'll get sick standing out here," she said, her voice softened by the rain around them. It wasn't what she meant to say. She had intended something more direct, more decisive. But the words felt clumsy, inappropriate against the gravity of what she was seeing. The boy blinked slowly, as if sorting her statement into a category he didn't have a name for. One of the babies stirred, a tiny fist pushing out from the blanket before retreating again. A thin wail trembled at the edge of the infant's breath. "I'm not asking for money," the boy said. His voice was steady but frayed at the edges, the way fabric begins to wear after too many washes. "I didn't say you were." He adjusted his grip, shifting the twin on his left hip. The baby's small knitted cap slid sideways, revealing wisps of hair plastered to a damp forehead. Evelyn felt something in her chest tighten, sharp and sudden, like a hand gripping the inside of her ribcage. She reached out instinctively to fix the cap, but stopped herself midway, unsure if her touch would feel like a kindness or a threat. "They need a warm place," she murmured. "You all do." He swallowed. The rain hit harder, bouncing off the pavement, running down their clothes in rivulets that carried the city's residue. Thunder grumbled overhead, a reminder that the night wasn't done with any of them. "I can take you somewhere," she continued. "A shelter. A lobby. My car is right there." "No," the word cut through the rain, sharper than she expected from someone so young. His arms tightened around the babies, instinctively protective. "No shelters. Shelters." The refusal wasn't defiance, it was fear. Not of her, but of systems that chewed people up and spat them out even wetter than the rain had found them. She recognized that fear. She had known it once, long before marble floors and rooftop gardens. "I'm not trying to force you," she said gently. The boy's gaze flickered over her shoulder toward the car idling at the curb, then back to her face. The twins gave another weak cry, one starting where the other left off, like they were sharing the burden of distress between them. "We just need milk," he said finally, barely audible under the rain. "And somewhere dry for a little bit. Just for them." "Milk," Evelyn repeated, as if the word was a switch hidden in the dark. A child's need, simple and old as humanity. Not a con. Not manipulation. Not the complicated web of adult desperation she'd been trained to anticipate. "Milk." "Yes," he said. "Formula. The store is closed and..." His voice cracked, a crack he tried to swallow. She saw it. He tried to mask the tremble, but it lived at the corner of his mouth, in the way he took a slow, steadying breath. "What about their mother?" Evelyn asked. She approached. The boy looked away. Not downward in shame or sideways in evasion, but inward, into a place people only travel when the truth is too heavy to carry into the open. "She's gone," he said. A single raindrop rolled down his cheek with a stubborn path, too warm to be rain and too quiet to be anything but grief. The word gone hung between them like a thread snapping under weight. Evelyn stepped closer. The wind whipped her jacket open again, tugging at the seams, but she didn't fix it. Her umbrella, still folded in her hand, felt useless now, an object for mild inconveniences, not storms like this one. "How long have you been out here?" "Since afternoon," he said. "We tried the bus station, but they said I couldn't stay there with babies. So you came here." "I didn't know where else to go." His honesty was disarming. No exaggeration, no theatrics. Just the simple, exhausted truth of someone who had been trusted with life before he'd been taught how to live it. Another cry broke from one of the twins. A small, helpless sound that made something ancient stir inside Evelyn, something maternal and aching, something she had spent years smothering under schedules and mergers, and the quiet panic of a mother who had failed at the most essential thing. "Let me hold one," she said before she could stop herself. The boy stiffened, protective instinct flaring like a match. "No. It's okay. I won't take them from you. You don't know us." "I know rain," she said. "And cold. And the weight of carrying more than you should." For a moment they stood in a suspended pocket of storm, two strangers bound by nothing but a need that refused to be ignored. Then, slowly, hesitantly, the boy adjusted his hold and shifted one of the twins toward her. The baby was featherlight and impossibly warm against her soaked suit, a tiny heartbeat tapping against her sternum like a timid knock. Evelyn held her breath, and something inside her cracked open. The scent of baby powder mixed with rainwater rose like a ghost of a memory she had not invited but welcomed anyway. The boy watched her with a guarded expression, measuring her reactions, gauging whether this was a mistake. She met his eyes. Her voice softened into something she had forgotten she possessed. "What are their names?" He hesitated. "Luna," he said, nodding toward the twin in her arms. "And the other one is Leo." Luna and Leo. Moon and Lion. Light and strength. Names chosen by someone who believed in stories, or needed them to survive. "Beautiful," she whispered. Leo whimpered. Luna curled into her collarbone as if recognizing a warmth she'd been searching for all night. The tiny trust in that gesture made Evelyn exhale with a tremor she didn't want noticed. "Come," she said. "There's a place open this late. You can follow me. We'll get them fed. Then we'll figure out the rest." The boy looked at her, rain streaking down his cheeks in lines that could have been anything: exhaustion, fear, the quiet surrender of a child who had run out of choices. "Why are you helping us?" he asked. A reasonable question. One she didn't entirely know how to answer. "Because I see someone I once was. Because I failed someone I love. Because I can't drive away from you without breaking something I still need." But she said none of that. Instead, she answered with the truth that felt closest to her throat. "Because tonight," she said softly, "you shouldn't have to be the only adult here." He nodded once slowly, trusting her not with his life, but with something smaller and therefore infinitely more fragile: the next step. She turned toward the car, Luna held close against her chest. And behind her the boy followed, Leo tucked under his chin, not knowing, none of them knowing, that the truth waiting for them beyond the rain would unravel everything she thought she'd built, everything she thought she'd buried, and everything she thought she'd lost forever. The rain did not lighten. If anything, it thickened around them as if the sky sensed something delicate unfolding below and tried to drown it before it grew too bright. Evelyn tightened her hold on little Luna, feeling the baby's tiny breaths fan softly against the hollow of her neck. Each inhale was fragile, feather-light, as if the night itself had been holding its breath, waiting for someone to finally pick her up. Behind her, the boy hurried to keep close, cradling Leo with the desperation of someone who had memorized every wrong thing that could happen when you loosen your grip. His shoes slapped against the waterlogged pavement, each step carrying the rhythm of fear mixed with responsibility. He wasn't used to being noticed. She could tell by the way he flinched when a car passed too close, as if expecting judgment to fall from any open window. Evelyn reached the curb where her driver waited beneath the glow of a distorted street lamp. The light, filtered through rain, bent, flickered, then steadied, illuminating the car like a polished shadow against the storm. The driver's eyes widened slightly when he saw the baby in her arms, but years of professional restraint kept his expression disciplined. "Open the back door," she said. "Yes, Ms. Marks." He moved quickly, but not quickly enough to hide the confusion that tugged at his mouth. Her car was not made for this. It was made for polished shoes and curated conversations, leather seats that carried the scent of expensive decisions. It was not made for soaked blankets, trembling teenagers, or the kind of human emergency that could not be billed. Evelyn slid into the back seat, settling Luna in her lap, careful not to jostle her. The car interior, warmed by vents and insulated from the storm, wrapped around her like a sigh she hadn't meant to release. But the moment comfort touched her skin, she saw the boy hesitate on the sidewalk. He stood half shielded by the rain, eyes darting between the open door and the darkness beyond the alley, as if torn between wanting help and fearing what it might cost. "It's all right," she said, meeting his gaze. "Get in." He pressed his lips together, lifted Leo slightly higher on his chest, and stepped inside. When the door shut, rain sounds dulled instantly, replaced by the soft hum of the engine and the baby's small fitful whimpers. Evelyn angled herself toward him. Luna slept against her, exhaustion pulling her into a restless doze. The boy, meanwhile, looked around the car like someone who had stepped into a place he wasn't sure he was allowed to occupy. "What's your name?" she asked gently. He hesitated. "Micah." "How old are you, Micah?" 16, he said, then lowered his eyes. "Almost 16. God. A child raising two smaller children in a storm the world pretended not to see. Where are your parents? She asked softly. Micah swallowed. The question landed like a stone in his throat. His fingers tightened around Leo's blanket, pulling it closer, as if fabric could make truth easier. Don't have any, he said finally. The words were flat, too practiced. Either repeated often or carried too long. Evelyn didn't press. She knew that tone. She had spoken that tone. Some answers were small graves. You didn't dig unless asked. The driver glanced at them through the rearview mirror. Where to, Miss Marks? Northside Market, she replied quickly. They keep the pharmacy open late. Micah's jaw twitched. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, she said, cutting gently across him. But we're doing it anyway. He fell silent. Not in defiance but in surrender. An exhausted, uneven kind of surrender that children rarely give unless life has demanded too much too soon. As the car pulled into traffic, Evelyn watched droplets race down the windows, merging, splitting, combining again. Rain on glass always made her think of childhood afternoons hiding behind store windows, watching storms wash away chalk drawings on the pavement. She remembered pressing her hand against cold glass, wishing someone, would open a door and let her in before the world ate through the last of her bravery. The city rolled by in a blur of neon reflection. Pedestrians huddled under awnings, taxis splashed through puddles large enough to carry tiny universes, and somewhere in the distance, sirens argued with thunder. The city never slept, but tonight it felt disoriented, restless, as if it knew a secret was riding in the back seat, waiting to breathe. Micah adjusted Leo again, carefully, like he was afraid of waking him even though the baby's eyes were barely slits of awareness. Evelyn noticed how Micah's fingers trembled, not from fear but from cold. She reached across the armrest and turned up the heat. Thanks, he murmured. She nodded. How long have you been taking care of them? Micah blinked at her, as if expecting judgment. Since they were born, he whispered. 3 months. 3 months, she repeated softly, unable to mask the disbelief. You've been doing this alone? Someone had to. The simplicity of his answer carried more weight than tears. It wasn't bravado. It wasn't martyrdom. It was a child telling the world he'd stepped up because nobody else had. Evelyn looked at the babies, their small chests rising and falling beneath mismatched blankets, cheeks flushed from cold, lips parted in tiny breaths. She looked back at Micah. Whose children are they? Micah exhaled shakily. His gaze dropped to his lap. My sister's. His voice thinned. She passed away. After they were born. It was complications. They tried to help but... He stopped. His shoulders shook once, almost imperceptibly, but Evelyn saw it. Pain always knew how to reveal itself in the smallest ways. She felt her throat tighten. And their father? She asked quietly. Micah's mouth hardened. Left when he found out she was pregnant. Never came back. The car seemed to shrink, the air thickening around the confession. Evelyn's fingers brushed Luna's tiny back, and with that simple contact came a memory so sharp she nearly winced. A younger version of herself sitting in a hospital waiting room, holding a folder full of test results, alone, her partner's absence louder than any voice in the room. I'm sorry, she said. Micah nodded once. The car slowed as they approached a red light. Evelyn glanced out the window. Storefronts glistened under street lamps, puddles shimmering with reflections of gold and green. A convenience store flickered with an open 24 hours sign that fought bravely against the wind. Pull in here, she told the driver. They stopped under the overhang, the rain drumming above them like impatient fingers. She turned to Micah. I'll get the formula. Stay inside with them. He blinked. You don't have to do that. You're soaked. They're cold. She met his eyes. Let me do this much. He didn't argue again. His shoulders slumped, not in defeat, but in relief he didn't want noticed. As she opened the car door, a gust of wind slapped her hair across her face. She stepped into the store quickly, shaking water from her sleeves. Inside, the buzz of fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting the small aisles in a pale glow. She grabbed the most expensive brand of infant formula, 2 canisters, then another. Micah had said milk, but milk was only the beginning. Babies needed more than calories, they needed safety, consistency, warmth. She added diapers to her basket. Wipes. Small bottles. Baby blankets. A soft blue cap and a pink one. A pack of tissues, for reasons she didn't want to examine. At the register, the clerk raised an eyebrow. Got twins, he said lightly. Evelyn paused. Someone does, she murmured. Back in the car, she set the bags at her feet. Micah stared at the supplies, his mouth opening and closing around words he couldn't release. You didn't need to buy all that, he said quietly. I know. Why did you? She didn't answer right away. The rain pressed against the windows, impatient for the next revelation. Micah looked at her with eyes that had seen too much but still held the kind of hope that ruins even the most fortified hearts. Because no one bought it for me, she said finally. Micah frowned. What do you mean? But she didn't elaborate. Not yet. It wasn't time. She took out a bottle, gently lifted Luna, and began preparing formula. The baby rooted against her shoulder, finding comfort in her warmth, her scent, her steady hands. And in that moment, feeding a stranger's child in the dim backseat of a black sedan, Evelyn Marks felt something shift in her chest, subtle but seismic. A weight she had carried for years lifted just enough for breath to pass through a space long sealed. Micah watched her, confusion and gratitude battling in his expression. You're different, he whispered. How so? You're rich, he said. People like you don't stop for people like us. Evelyn looked down at Luna's sleepy face, the small eyelashes clumped from rain, the fingers curling against her collarbone. Maybe, she said quietly, you're wrong about people like me. Micah looked out the window, as if searching for an answer in the rain-soaked world beyond. Rain blurred the city into watercolor streaks. The car interior felt warmer. Leo slept. Luna breathed softly. Micah leaned back, exhaustion finally claiming him for a moment. And Evelyn? Evelyn stared out at the storm and knew, deep in the marrow of her regret, that this encounter was not an accident. It was a summons, a reckoning, and somewhere in the shadows of the truth waiting to reveal itself. Her past was already rising to the surface. The first thing that changed was the air. In the car it had been thick with damp clothes and worry, heavy with the smell of wet wool and formula powder. But when the sedan pulled up under the portico of the Viridian riverfront and the doors opened, the atmosphere shifted. Warmth rolled out from the revolving glass doors, perfumed with citrus and polished wood, the carefully controlled climate of a place that had been built to forget whatever weather the city threw at it. Micah stared up at the building as if it might flinch. The hotel rose into the rainy sky like an illuminated promise, each window a rectangle of curated comfort. The gold letters of the Viridian logo glowed above the entrance, reflected in the slick pavement like a duplicate world beneath their feet. You live here? He asked quietly. No, Evelyn said. I own it. He turned to look at her, skepticism flickering in his eyes. Awe. 16-year-olds hear about billionaires the way children hear about dragons, distant, dangerous, unreal. It was another thing entirely to be led through their front doors with an infant in your arms. You own the whole building, he pressed. This one, she replied. And others. He whistled under his breath, a short, incredulous sound that he immediately seemed to regret, like he thought it might count as rudeness. Leo stirred against his chest, tucking his face into Micah's hoodie to escape the lights. Come on, she said softly. Let's get them inside. The doorman saw her first. Philip. Early 50s, immaculate uniform. The kind smile of a man who had learned to be both gatekeeper and ghost. His posture straightened when he recognized her, eyes widening just enough to acknowledge that this was not a standard arrival. Good evening, Miss Marks, he said, pulling the glass door fully open. His gaze dropped to the sleeping baby in her arms, then to the one held close against Micah's chest. And welcome. Evening, Philip. She stepped past him, leaving a small trail of rain on the marble. We'll need a suite. Top floor. And someone from housekeeping with extra linens, a crib, whatever they have for infants. Right away. He didn't ask questions. That was one of the things she valued about him. But as she walked across the lobby, she could feel the glances trailing behind her. Staff at the reception desk straightened, their smiles tightening with professional curiosity. A pair of guests lounging in armchairs near the fireplace looked up from their cocktails, eyes flickering over Micah's damp hoodie and worn sneakers, the baby's mismatched blankets. The lobby was designed to impress without shouting. High ceilings, warm stone, an art installation of hanging glass that caught the light like frozen rain. In another life, Evelyn might have been proud of it. Tonight it felt like a stage she hadn't meant to step onto. Micah shifted his weight, as if he could feel the judgments brushing against his clothes like cold hands. "You sure it's okay that we're here?" he whispered. "Yes," she said firmly. "This is my building. You're my guest." Something about the phrase softened his shoulders a fraction. Guest. For a boy who'd been pushed out of bus stations and doorways all day, the word moved through him like a small, cautious blessing. At the reception desk, the night manager, a slim woman with sharp cheekbones and a sharper sense of hierarchy, stepped forward. Her name tag read Clara. "Ms. Marks," she greeted, her smile bright, eyes quickly assessing the unusual grouping. "We didn't know you were coming in tonight." "I hadn't planned to." Evelyn adjusted Luna, who had started to squirm against her. "I'll need the river suite." Clara flicked her gaze to the computer screen. "Of course. It's available." "Good." Evelyn lowered her voice slightly. "Also, waive the ID requirement for my guest. He doesn't have one." Micah's head jerked toward her, surprise flaring in his expression. Clara hesitated, her manicured fingers hovering above the keyboard. Policies lined up in her mind like soldiers preparing an argument. Evelyn watched the conflict flicker across her face. Loyalty to procedure, loyalty to the woman who signed her paycheck. "Yes, Ms. Marks," she said finally. "We'll take care of it. And send up housekeeping with cribs, baby supplies, whatever we stock," Evelyn added. "And something hot to drink. Soup, tea, extra towels." Clara nodded again, more quickly this time. The machine accepted her inputs with a muted beep. A keycard slid out slick and inert. Evelyn took it, then turned to Micah. "Come on." They rode the elevator in silence at first. The mirrored walls captured their reflections from all angles. The billionaire in a damp white suit holding a sleeping infant, the boy in a sodden hoodie, arms full of baby, eyes wide with a mix of awe and suspicion. Micah watched the floor numbers rise, his gaze darting between the digital display and the smooth wood paneling. "I've never been in a place like this," he admitted, voice small against the soft music piping through hidden speakers. "What kind of places have you been in?" she asked. He thought for a long moment. "Shelters," he said. "Basements. Couch corners at my friends'. Hallways when the landlord changed the locks and forgot we were still inside." The elevator hummed, unbothered, as if the weight of his words did not register on its cables. "And before," she pushed gently. "When your sister was alive?" He shifted Leo higher on his chest, eyes going far away. "We had an apartment. Sometimes." A faint smile touched his mouth, quick and fragile. "It wasn't fancy or anything. Just a place, but it was ours. She painted the walls herself. Said white was for people who were afraid of color." "She sounds brave," Evelyn said. "She was," he replied. The past tense landed like a stone dropped into deep water. The elevator chimed softly. The doors slid open onto thick carpet and softer lighting. The top floor. At this hour, the corridor was empty, the hush broken only by the distant hum of the city pressing against the windows. Evelyn led him to the end of the hall where the river suite waited behind a door that weighed more than some people's entire history. She swiped the card. The lock clicked, a tiny mechanical surrender, and the door swung inward. Micah stepped inside and stopped dead. The suite was sprawling, all soft light and neutral tones, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the river like a painting. A small kitchen gleamed with untouched appliances, the living area populated by armchairs that looked like they sigh when you sit down. Beyond a half-open door, a bedroom waited, bed piled with pillows, a comforter so plush it seemed almost obscene. Micah's eyes moved over the space, cataloging details with the stunned caution of someone who expects to be told at any moment that this is a tour, not an invitation. "This is for us?" he asked. "For tonight," she said. "Yes." He turned in a slow circle. A droplet of water fell from his hair onto the polished floor, marking his path. Leo stirred and let out a small cry, reminding them both that awe and hunger can coexist. "First things first," Evelyn said. "Let's get them warm and fed properly." As if summoned, a soft knock sounded at the door. "Housekeeping." A young man in a neatly pressed uniform wheeled in a cart laden with folded linens, a portable crib, A basket of baby toiletries the hotel probably bought for out-of-town weddings with fussy nieces. He set everything up quickly, stealing glances at the twins with unabashed curiosity. Twins, wow, he said. My sister's got one and she hasn't slept in 3 months. Evelyn almost smiled. Thank you, Tomas. He blinked. You remember my name. I try to remember everyone who keeps my buildings running, she said. It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. When he left, Evelyn turned to Micah. You can lay Leo down here while we get things sorted. Micah hesitated, holding the baby tighter. He'll cry if I put him down. Then stay close, she said. We're not going anywhere. She moved through the room with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent years managing chaos in quieter packaging. Sterilizing bottles, mixing formula properly, checking the temperature on the inside of her wrist like she'd done decades ago with a much smaller, much more terrifyingly fragile life. As she worked, Micah sank into one of the sofa cushions as if he had been granted temporary exile from gravity. He kept Leo in his arms, bouncing him gently, murmuring nonsense syllables under his breath. He watched her with cautious interest, like he was trying to reconcile the woman who owned the building with the one who now checked a baby's bottle as carefully as any nurse. You've done this before, he said. She froze for a fraction of a second. Yes. Do you have kids? The question slotted itself neatly into a wound she had forgotten how to bandage. Images flickered through her mind. A small girl with paint on her fingers, a teenager with headphones on, a young woman at a doorway saying she couldn't be the afterthought anymore. I have a daughter, she said. Saying it in the present tense felt like walking onto ice she wasn't sure would hold. Her name is Ava. Where is she? The simplest questions were sometimes the hardest to answer. Not here, Evelyn replied. We haven't spoken in a long time. Micah nodded as if that was a normal kind of distance. Maybe she'll call you, he said. He said, with the blunt optimism that didn't understand yet how time calcified silence. People do that sometimes. When they need you. Evelyn swallowed. Maybe. She handed him the now-filled bottle. Here. Give this to Leo. He obeyed, the act smoothing some of the tightness from his shoulders. Feeding someone else is a strange kind of power, and sometimes the only kind that doesn't corrupt. Leo latched greedily, his thin fingers flexing against the bottle. How long have you been out? On your own, she asked. Micah watched the baby's face. Since about a month after they were born, he said quietly. We were staying with a neighbor for a bit. Then he got scared the landlord would find out and kick him out too. Said we were bad luck. So you left. We had to. His jaw clenched. I'm not going to let my sister's kids be thrown away just because they make people uncomfortable. The words were young, but the resolve in them was old. Too old. What about before? She pressed gently. You said you had an apartment. Micah nodded, eyes far away again. We used to live in Riverside Towers, he said. On the east side. It wasn't great, but it was home. The name hit her like a slap she hadn't braced for. Riverside Towers. Her brain immediately pulled up an internal file. A grid of numbers and notes. Riverside, aging complex acquired 5 years ago. Minor renovations cost overruns. Reports of mold in the lower floors. A line in her CFO's last memo about selling off the troublesome asset. How long did you live there? She asked carefully. Couple of years, Micah replied. Moved in after my mom, after she died. A charity program helped with the rent. They said it was stabilized housing. He smiled bitterly at the phrase. Guess that's a joke now. Why did you leave? Her voice was thinner than she wanted it to be. His hand tightened around the bottle. The landlord changed, he said simply. At first nothing happened. Then one day we got a notice under the door. Said the building was being redeveloped, she offered. Yeah, that. His nostrils flared. They said we could come back after the renovations if we qualified. But the rent they put on the poster in the lobby was more than my sister made in 3 months. He laughed, a sound with no humor in it. So we qualified for the street, I guess. A cold, specific dread coiled in Evelyn's stomach. She knew this story. Not from his side, but from quarterly reports and neatly formatted slide decks that recommended maximizing asset value. She saw in her mind's eye the email giving her options: keep the current tenants and accept reduced margins, or clear the building, upgrade, and attract higher-paying residents. The attachment had included projections with lines going up and to the right. Promised a better return, and written, in neat digital ink, proceed. She had never seen the faces attached to the units in that spreadsheet. Not until now. What charity program helped you move in? She asked, though part of her already feared the answer. Micah shrugged. Some housing thing. Viridian Care, I think. Took my mom's papers, my birth certificate, my sister's medical records. Said they'd support us for 2 years while we got on our feet. Viridian Care. Her brand. Her philanthropic shield. Used to soften the sharp edges of her portfolio. The arm of her empire that wrote press releases about giving back and community investment. She felt nausea twist beneath her ribs. She didn't show it. You didn't show weakness in rooms like this, even when the only witness was a boy who just unknowingly traced a straight line from his suffering to her pen. And when the building changed hands? She forced herself to ask. He came, Micah said. The new owner. Not him, but his man. Said the charity thing was over. That we had to pay the real rent now. He shook his head slowly. My sister begged. She had the twins coming. She was huge. They didn't care. Gave us 60 days. Then people started getting inspections and notices. Lights went out in the hallway. Elevator broke and didn't get fixed. Hot water started coming in brown. I think they wanted us to leave before the 60 days, so they could say we chose it. You stayed, she whispered. For as long as we could. His eyes darkened. Then my sister got sick. Something with her blood. The doctor said stress wasn't helping. We tried to find another place. Nobody wants a pregnant woman with no steady job and a teenage brother. Finally we had to go to the hospital. After, he broke off. His gaze dropped to Leo's face, as if anchoring himself in the present. After, they just told me to sign some papers. Gave me a form to request help. I filled it out. Never heard back. Her mind supplied the missing pages. She saw the intake forms piling up on some administrator's desk, the funding allocation spreadsheet with red notes about budget constraints, the memo earlier that week recommending cuts to the very program that had once rescued him. She had initialed those cuts. Probably while sipping coffee, barely glancing at the attached names. Micah looked around the suite again, taking in the high ceilings, the soft rug, the flat-screen television mounted on the wall. His jaw worked. What is it like? He asked suddenly. What is what like? She replied. Being rich, he said. There was no accusation in his tone. Just a raw, aching curiosity. Does it make things easier? She could have given him the answer interviews expected. Wealth is hard work. Money doesn't solve everything. There are problems you can't buy your way out. All the phrases that let people like her keep both their money and their clean conscience. Instead, she looked at the twins. At Micah's chapped hands. At the reflection of herself in the darkened window. Expensive fabric, tired eyes. It makes some things easier, she said slowly. It makes other things invisible. And it makes it very tempting to ignore the invisible things. He frowned. Why? Because once you see them, Evelyn said, you can't pretend they're not your responsibility. A silence settled between them. Not the awkward stiffness of strangers, but the heavy, pulsing kind that forms when truth sits down between two people and waits to see who will acknowledge it first. A soft chime from the suite's intercom broke the moment. Room service. The hotel moved efficiently around them, oblivious to the moral earthquake quietly remapping Evelyn's inner landscape. She opened the door to find a waiter with a tray, a pot of chamomile tea, a bowl of soup, fresh bread, and, at her last-minute request, a plate of plain pasta, something gentle enough for a stomach that had probably known more fear than food lately. Set it there, she instructed, pointing to the low table. As he arranged the dishes, Micah's eyes tracked every movement, not greedily, but with the wary interest of someone who doesn't yet believe abundance won't vanish if he blinks. You can eat, she said once they were alone again. Go. Before it gets cold. He hesitated, then shifted Leo into the crib with the awkward tenderness of someone unused to putting a baby down without the excuse of necessity. Miraculously, the child only fussed for a moment before settling, one tiny hand flung up as if claiming the soft hotel blanket as his. Micah sat at the table. For a second his posture went stiff, as if he'd expected someone to stop him. When nobody did, he picked up the spoon and took a cautious sip of soup. His eyes closed. It was a simple broth, nothing extraordinary, but to a body running on adrenaline and scraps, it was almost holy. "You can have more," she reminded him. "There's bread." He nodded, unable to speak around the lump in his throat. He ate with the restraint of someone who had learned hunger etiquette. Never take more than half of what's in front of you when you don't know if there will be seconds. "Micah," Evelyn said quietly, "how long have you been hungry?" He kept his gaze on the bowl. "Long enough that it feels normal," he whispered. The confession moved through her like a cold wind. In the bedroom, Luna shifted in the crib, letting out a soft, questioning sound. Without thinking, Evelyn went to her. She lifted the baby, cradling her against her own heartbeat, swaying gently. The small weight fit into the curve of her arms as if her body had kept the memory of this posture long after her mind tried to discard it. In her peripheral vision, she saw herself reflected again in the window, this time not as the billionaire with everything, but as a woman holding a child in a room built on decisions she could no longer claim were neutral. Micah pushed the empty bowl away, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand before catching himself and reaching for the napkin instead. Habit and shame danced in that tiny correction. "What happens now?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. What happens now? Now, she could arrange for a social worker to come in the morning, make some calls, leverage her status to push through emergency housing. She could send them off with a check and a guarantee, tell herself she'd done more than most, and fold this night into a neat anecdote about connecting with the community. She could tell herself it was enough. But as she stood in that warm suite while the storm battered the city outside, Luna's breath tickling her collarbone, Micah's eyes fixed on her with a mixture of hope and terror, she knew, down to the bedrock of who she had once been, that enough was no longer a number she could calculate from a distance. She thought of Ava, of a young woman waking up in some cramped apartment, if she even had one, telling herself a story about a mother who chose skyscrapers over bedtime stories. She thought of riverside towers, of a notice taped to a door, of a heavily pregnant girl begging a property manager for another month, another week. You approved the clearance, her conscience reminded her. You signed the cuts. You called it necessary restructuring so you wouldn't have to call it what it was. "What happens now," she said slowly, "depends on whether you trust me." Micah's brow furrowed. "To do what?" "To help," she replied. "Not just tonight. Properly." He swallowed hard. Trust was not a currency he had been given much of. The world had a habit of handing him loans of kindness with fine print glued to the back. "You don't know me," he said. "You don't know if I'm lying. Or if it's my fault. Or if—" he trailed off, shame flushing his cheeks. "If what?" she asked gently. "If I'm worth it," he finished, barely audible. The words hit her like a memory. She saw herself again, 19, sitting in a registrar's office, a scholarship hanging by a thread, the clerk looking at her over a stack of forms as if measuring exactly that question. "Worth." "You are," she said. No hesitation. "You are worth it. This isn't about deserving. It's about what should never have happened to you in the first place." His eyes shone. Tears filled them but didn't fall, held back by a dam built of years of ridicule about boys not crying. "You talk like you know," he said roughly. "I know some things," she admitted. "Maybe not everything. Maybe not your exact version. But I know what it's like to be young and cold, and told that other people's mistakes are your responsibility." Micah stared at her. Then slowly he nodded. "Okay," he whispered. "Then, I'll try." It wasn't an oath. It wasn't a surrender. It was a small door opening a crack in a very high wall. Evelyn didn't take it lightly. "Good," she said. "For tonight you sleep. You and the twins stay here. No one will disturb you. Tomorrow we'll talk about what comes next. And I'll make some calls." "Calls to who?" "To people who owe me favors," she said. "And to people who owe you more than they realize." He frowned. "Who owes me?" She exhaled slowly. The wind rattled the windows, demanding an answer she wasn't sure she was ready to voice. "People like me," she said. "Whether they know it yet or not." She laid Luna gently back in the crib, tucking the blanket around her. Micah watched, his exhaustion finally pulling his limbs earthward. You can take the bed, she told him. I'll stay out here on the sofa in case they wake. His eyes widened. No. No way. I can't take your bed. You're you. I'm also tired, she said with a faint smile. And my back is not as young as it once was. Believe me, the sofa here is better than most people's beds. He opened his mouth to protest again. She raised a hand, stopping him. This isn't a test, she said. It's a kindness. Accept it while it's being offered. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. Okay, he murmured. Just for tonight. Just for tonight. She knew, and some part of him probably did too, that tonight was not going to stay contained in its own box. There are nights that come and go, barely brushing the surface. And then there are nights that sink their hands into the seams of your life and begin to pull. Micah vanished into the bedroom, emerging a few minutes later in a hotel robe that looked slightly ridiculous on his thin frame. The sleeves rolled up over his wrists. His clothes, hoodie, jeans, socks, hung over the back of a chair, dripping faintly onto the tile. Feels like wearing a cloud, he muttered, embarrassment wrestling with comfort. Evelyn smiled, a real one this time. That's the point. He glanced once more at the twins, then at her. You'll watch them? Yes, you promise? If they cry. I'll be here, she said. Go sleep, Micah. The world will still be complicated in the morning. You may as well face it with your eyes open. He gave a tiny tired huff of laughter at that. Okay, he whispered. Good night, Miss Marks. Good night. When the bedroom door clicked shut, the suite settled into a new kind of quiet. The storm outside had softened, the rain now a steady, calming pour, like the city had tired itself out. She moved to the window, standing where the glass met the floor. The river below glistened black and silver, streetlights scattering coins of light across its surface. Somewhere out there, Riverside Towers hunched under the rain, its emptied apartments. Nadia's name lit up the screen. She answered. I was starting to worry, Nadia said. Did you go straight home? No, Evelyn replied. Her voice sounded different to her own ears, less polished, less armored. I'm at the riverfront. At this hour? Nadia paused. Everything okay? Evelyn glanced back at the crib, at the two small chests rising and falling in imperfect tandem, at Micah's damp hoodie folded over the chair, at the soup bowl empty. No, she said honestly, but it might be eventually. There was a rustle of fabric, as if Nadia had sat down. What happened? Evelyn hesitated, then said it. I met a boy in the rain. With twin babies. Viridian Care placed his family in Riverside Towers. Then we cleared the building and cut the program that was supposed to catch them when they fell. On the other end, silence. Then a soft, pained exhale. Oh, Evelyn repeated, the small syllable suddenly heavy. He's 16. His sister died giving birth to the twins. He's been trying to keep them alive ever since. In the city where my name is on half the high-rises. Nadia was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. What do you want to do? The question met her in a place beyond revenue projections and board expectations. It went straight to the frightened girl who once stared at eviction notices and wondered if the world would ever feel safe under her feet. I want to fix what I can, she said. For him. For other families we've displaced. For Ava, if she ever hears about this and thinks I stayed blind. That's not going to be simple, Nadia warned gently. No, Evelyn agreed. It won't be. But I think I'm done with what's simple. On the line, she could practically hear Nadia nod. All right, her assistant said. Tell me what you need. Evelyn looked again at the sleeping twins. At the empty soup bowl. At the key card on the table, a small plastic symbol of access and control. Tomorrow, she said. I need you to find me everything we have on Riverside Towers. Every memo, every email, every complaint. And I want a list of every tenant we pushed out in the last 5 years, not just there. Citywide. That's a lot of people, Nadia said quietly. Yes, Evelyn replied. And I want to know their names, not just their unit numbers. No more faceless spreadsheets. Okay, Nadia said, determination tightening her tone. I'll start pulling it tonight. Nadia. Yes. Thank you. For not telling me I've lost my mind. Nadia gave a small, exhausted laugh. You built a global empire from nothing. I think you're entitled to change which direction it faces. She paused. And for what it's worth, I think this is the sanest I've heard you sound in years. When the call ended, the room felt echoey, but more honest. She turned off the main lights, leaving only a lamp near the crib glowing soft gold. Then she lay down on the sofa, one hand resting on the edge of the crib as if she could keep the twins tethered to the world by touch alone. Rain whispered against the glass. In another part of the city, in some small silent apartment, a young woman named Ava turned over in her sleep, frowning at a dream slipping just beyond memory. Somewhere in the dense stack of emails on a server, the thread about Riverside Towers sat quietly, waiting for a pair of eyes that now finally wanted to see. And in the River Suite, a billionaire who had everything, a boy who had almost nothing, and two babies who had no idea yet what any of it meant were bound together by a storm that had not asked permission to rearrange their lives. Outside, the river moved steadily toward morning. Inside, without realizing it, Evelyn Marks did too. Morning didn't begin in the suite so much as unfold. It crept in through the floor-to-ceiling windows as a pale, reluctant light, brushing over the room like a hand trying not to wake a sleeping child. Dawn in the city was usually a cold, metallic thing, but today it felt softer, diffused through clouds swollen from the night storm. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, a thin silver thread stitching sky to river. Evelyn was already awake. She had not slept much, an hour here, another there, dozing lightly on the sofa with her hand resting on the side of the crib as if keeping the twins tethered to the world. Her body protested as she sat up, joints stiff, hair falling loose from its usual immaculate style. For once, she didn't reach immediately for her phone or brush. She sat still, letting the weight of the night settle into clarity. In the crib, Luna and Leo slept in near synchrony, two tiny chests rising and falling beneath soft hotel blankets. And from the bedroom, she could hear the even, exhausted breathing of a boy who'd finally surrendered to rest. She stood, stretching slowly, letting the stiffness pull at her in familiar ways. Then she crossed to the window. The river below moved like something ancient and patient, unbothered by the chaos it reflected. Her reflection floated on the glass, pale, tired, hair mussed, suit wrinkled, eyes ringed with the kind of honesty only certain nights could carve into a face. For the first time in many years, she didn't turn away from that reflection. She let herself look. A woman with everything. A woman who had missed everything that mattered. A woman being asked by a boy, by the past, by fate, to choose differently this time. She closed her eyes for a moment, placing her hand over the cold glass the way she once pressed her hand to her daughter's feverish forehead, whispering useless reassurances. But the memory refused to fully surface, slipping back into the dark the moment she reached for it. Behind her, a tiny cry pierced the hush of morning. She turned immediately. Luna was awake, fists curled, face scrunched in the universal language of hungry babies. Evelyn scooped her up with a tenderness that felt both instinctive and foreign, like a language she hadn't spoken in years but still remembered the cadence of. "Good morning, little moon," she whispered. Luna blinked, then burrowed into her shoulder as if deciding she approved of the greeting. Evelyn prepared a bottle quietly, conscious not to wake Micah just yet. She fed Luna near the window, rocking slowly. The sun, faint and reluctant, caught the baby's eyelashes and painted them in gold threads. For a moment, just a sliver of one, it felt like another lifetime. Another morning. Another child in her arms. The smell of formula. The soft weight. The warmth. Her throat tightened. She kissed Luna's tiny forehead, a gesture that surprised her even as she did it. A soft sound escaped her, a sigh or a prayer, she wasn't sure. The bedroom door creaked. Micah stood there, hair tousled, robe slightly askew, lines of sleep still softening his face. He blinked at the scene. Her standing by the window, feeding Luna, wrapped in daylight like a truth he hadn't expected. "You didn't wake me," he said, voice rough with sleep. "You needed the rest." "You didn't." She almost smiled. "I've survived on worse." He stepped fully into the room, rubbing his eyes before instinctively checking the crib. When he saw Leo still asleep, he seemed to exhale. "You look different," he said cautiously. "Bad different?" "No. Just not like yesterday." She nodded, accepting the observation without defense. "Yesterday was heavy." Micah walked toward the table where the soup bowls still sat. He traced a finger along the rim without looking at her. "You meant what you said last night?" he asked softly. "About helping?" "I meant every word." He nodded, absorbing that. His fingers tapped anxiously against the table. Something inside him was bracing. Hope was dangerous. He wasn't used to holding it. "What if?" he hesitated. "What if someone finds out I'm here? What if they make you take us out?" "Nobody is taking you out of here," she said firmly. "You're here because I want you here." He blinked. "Why?" She didn't answer with numbers or charity metrics or corporate phrases. She let the truth rise on its own, raw and unpolished. "Because somebody should have helped you a long time ago," she said. "And because I might be trying to make up for helping the wrong people for too many years." A flicker of understanding crossed his face, though he didn't yet realize how tightly his family's tragedy was knotted to her decisions. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. Before we go anywhere today." Evelyn paused mid-rock. "What is it?" "When they kicked us out of Riverside, when things got bad," he swallowed hard. "My sister wrote letters." "People," he said. "To charities. To landlords. To the housing office. To the city. She kept saying we could fix things if we found the right person to read her letters." Evelyn's blood chilled. He went on. "When she got sick, she wrote one more. She said it was the one that mattered. She said if someone powerful read it, they'd have to help." The room tightened around them. Micah's hand shook as he reached into the pocket of his folded jeans on the chair. He pulled out a small, bent envelope, edges softened by time and rain and handling. "She didn't get to mail it," he whispered. "She died before she found a stamp." He held it toward Evelyn. Her heart thudded once hard. "Who was it addressed to?" she asked. Micah turned the envelope over and read aloud. "To the owner of Viridian Properties. Please help my family." Evelyn went still. Stone still. As if her bones had turned to ice. Micah didn't notice he was looking at the envelope, not her face. But every atom in her shifted. Her past choices were no longer abstract lines on a spreadsheet. They were written on that envelope. In hospital corridors. In eviction notices. In cold nights under leaking roofs. And now, standing barefoot in a luxury suite, she was holding the aftermath of her own neglect. She reached for the envelope with hands that trembled. Micah did not let go immediately. "You don't have to read it," he said. "But I thought maybe it matters. To someone." "It does," she said hoarsely. "It matters to me." Micah nodded faintly and released it into her grasp. The paper was worn, softened by droplets, rain or tears she couldn't tell. The handwriting was shaky but elegant, each letter formed with hope and exhaustion. "Please, if you're reading this, I'm begging you. I don't want my babies born on the street. We just need time. Please, help us." Her vision wavered. Behind her ribs, something cracked open so sharply she inhaled as if stabbed. Micah watched her, waiting. She folded the letter gently, as if it were a fragile artifact pulled from rubble. "Micah," she whispered, her voice a wound. "She wrote this to me." His head lifted, eyes narrowing in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I'm the owner of Viridian Properties," she said. The person she was trying to reach. The room went very, very still. Micah stared, breath halted, eyes wide. Not angry, not yet, but stunned, shattered by a truth large enough to cast shadows in every direction. "You," he whispered. "You were the one she wrote to?" Crack in his voice. A fracture starting. "She believed someone upstairs would listen," he said, voice trembling, "that someone rich would care if she just said the right thing." Evelyn felt the weight of those words slide down her spine like cold water. "I didn't see it," she whispered. "I didn't. I never received." But excuses. None of them mattered here. Micah shook his head slowly, breath unsteady. She trusted the wrong person. Evelyn's throat closed. "I won't let that be the end of the story," she said fiercely. "I won't let her letter go unanswered. Not again. Not ever." Micah looked at her as if trying to determine whether redemption could fit inside a single human body. The twins stirred. Leo let out a small cry that cracked through the tension like a flare in the dark. Micah inhaled sharply, blinking, grounding himself in the sound. Evelyn stepped closer. Not to him but beside him. So they were looking at the twins together. Whatever happens now, she said, steady and sure, you are not doing this alone anymore. Not another day. Not another night. The edge in her voice was no longer regret, it was resolve. A vow. A reorientation of an entire empire. Micah wiped his cheek with the back of his hand, unaware that tears had finally broken free in thin, trembling lines. Okay, he whispered. Okay. Outside, the rain eased at last. Inside, something far heavier began to lift. The rain had stopped, but its memory clung to the world like a scent. A thin mist hovered over the river, drifting across the glass as if uncertain whether to disappear or settle deeper into the city's pores. Morning had matured into late morning, pale sunlight pushing through heavy clouds, the kind of light that revealed everything softly, without judgment. Inside the suite, however, nothing felt soft. Micah stood by the table, hands braced on its edge, the letter between them like a fragile artifact that could shatter with one wrong breath. Evelyn stood a few feet away, her posture composed in the way only decades of boardrooms could teach, yet cracked at the center. Her heartbeat thudded against her ribs, loud enough that she wondered if the twins could hear it. For a long moment neither spoke. Words felt inadequate, too blunt for the tension woven through the air. Micah finally broke the silence. My sister thought rich people didn't see us, he said, voice quiet but shaking underneath. She thought they lived so high up they couldn't hear us from the street. Evelyn swallowed hard. I didn't hear her, she whispered. That's the truth. I should have. Micah looked at her, not with blame exactly, but with a kind of stunned hurt that weighed more than anger. She wrote every day for a week, he murmured. Said maybe if she kept writing, someone would notice. His fingers tapped the envelope, tracing the crease as if trying to understand how something so small could hold so much loss. Evelyn stepped closer, careful not to overwhelm him. Micah, if I had seen her letters, if I had known. But you didn't, he said, not cruelly, just stating a fact. She was begging someone she'd never meet, someone who didn't know we existed. It was the simplicity of his tone that cut the deepest. I was that someone, she said. He exhaled sharply, a sound caught between disbelief and grief. So what now? What do we do with this? You say you want to help, but can help bring her back? Can it fix what happened after? Can it fix everything the city did to us? Evelyn felt something deep inside her twist, a spiral of guilt and resolve tightening at the same time. No, she said honestly. It can't bring her back. Nothing can. But it can change what happens from here forward. Micah didn't move. Didn't respond. His silence wasn't rejection, just fear of believing the wrong thing again. The twins began to stir in the crib, their small morning noises like reminders that life, stubborn and relentless, insists on continuing no matter how broken the backdrop is. Evelyn forced herself to inhale deeply. Micah, she said gently, let me explain to you what happened with that building. Not because it excuses anything, but because you deserve transparency. He didn't look at her. But he didn't walk away either. When Viridian took over Riverside, we planned to renovate it, to make it safer, cleaner, structurally sound. But the numbers, they became the priority. Costs were higher than expected. Revenue was down elsewhere. There were proposals to raise rents to fund improvements. And you agreed, Micah said, still not meeting her eyes. Yes, she said quietly. I agreed. He pressed his lips together. And we were in the way. The truth was too sharp to soften. Yes, she whispered. A tear escaped down Micah's cheek. He wiped it quickly with the back of his hand, embarrassed. I thought the city just forgot about us, he murmured. I didn't know it had a name. The name being hers. Evelyn stepped closer, her voice trembling despite her effort to steady it. You were never supposed to be forgotten, she said. The system failed you. My decisions were part of that system. I can't take that back. But I can be accountable now. Micah looked up slowly. His eyes weren't angry. They were wounded, raw, disbelieving in a way that made her stomach twist. There is something deeply painful about watching a child try to decide whether to hope. What does accountability even mean? He whispered. To someone like you? The question wasn't rhetorical. It was desperate. It means, she said softly, that I use every resource I have to make sure what happened to your family doesn't happen to anyone else under my name again. It means I take responsibility, not in words but in actions. It means I start by helping you rebuild the life you were denied." Micah's throat bobbed. He looked toward the twins, tiny, innocent, tangled in blankets that weren't theirs but were warm enough to trust. "What if I don't fit anywhere?" he asked suddenly, voice cracking. "What if no one wants a 16-year-old with 2 babies? What if the city takes them away? What if I'm not enough?" Evelyn felt the room shift. This, she realized, wasn't about her. Or Riverside. Or legality. It was the fear of a boy who'd been carrying a world far too heavy for his bones. She walked to him slowly, giving him time to move if he wanted distance. He didn't. "You've been enough," she said softly. "Every day since they were born. You've kept them warm. You've fed them. You've kept them safe even when you had nowhere to go. They almost got sick in the rain," he whispered. "They're here now," she said. "Alive because of you." Micah covered his face with both hands, shoulders trembling. Not crying loudly, just breaking quietly, the way boys who were told not to cry their whole lives eventually do when they finally find somewhere safe enough to shatter. She didn't touch him. Not yet. She remembered what it meant to be touched while fragile. It could feel like blessing or intrusion. She simply stood beside him, letting him have space to unravel. It took several minutes before he lowered his hands again. His eyes were red. His voice small. "What do we do now?" he whispered. Evelyn took a deep breath, one she felt in her spine. "We start with breakfast," she said gently. "Then we look at options. Real ones. Not temporary shelters or broken systems. Proper housing. Legal guardianship support. Counseling. Medical checks for the babies. Schooling for you. And a formal inquiry into what happened at Riverside." Micah blinked. "All that? For us?" "Yes," she said. "For you. For your sister's memory. For everyone who fell through the cracks because I wasn't looking." He stared at her, studying her face for deception. When he didn't find any, the disbelief softened, replaced by something fragile and blooming. Hope. It was still small, still trembling, but it existed, and that alone felt like a miracle. He nodded, a tiny motion but enough to shift the air. "Okay," he whispered. "I'll try." "You don't have to do this alone," she said. "Not anymore." The suite felt warmer then, still wrapped in the gravity of truth, but no longer suffocating. Morning light filled the room. The twins yawned, stretching tiny arms. Life, stubborn as always, pushed forward. There was a knock at the door. Evelyn frowned slightly. "That will be housekeeping." But when she opened the door, it wasn't housekeeping. It was Nadia. Her assistant stood there holding a tablet, a folder stuffed with papers, and an expression that said, "I know you asked for the truth, so I brought all of it." Her eyes flicked past Evelyn into the suite, landing on Micah, on the twins, on the blankets, on the exhaustion etched into the boy's shoulders. "Oh," she breathed softly. Not judgment, understanding. "You said you wanted everything on Riverside," she murmured, stepped aside. "Come in." Micah watched Nadia with caution, unsure if she was another part of the machine that had pushed him out. Nadia knelt beside him so they were at eye level. "Hi," she said simply. "I'm Nadia. I work with her. And I want you to know that you're safe here." Micah nodded slowly. Nadia's gaze moved to Evelyn, and her voice dropped. "You should read this first." She handed her a document, an email from 3 years ago. A memo Evelyn had skimmed. A memo she had approved. Tenant compliance is low. Evictions will expedite renovation. Recommend proceeding before Q2 to maximize return. Signed by her property managers. Stamped with her initials. Her breath hitched. She looked over at the twins, at Micah holding on to Leo as if someone might still pull him away, at the rain-softened letter on the table. And the truth settled over her like a verdict she could not outrun. Her decisions had pushed this family into the storm. Her signature had contributed to a mother begging the universe for mercy. Her indifference had cost more than she had ever imagined. She closed her eyes, inhaled shakily, and felt the weight of her empire settle onto her shoulders differently this time, no longer as an achievement but as a responsibility. She opened her eyes again. "We're going to fix this," she said. She wasn't speaking to Nadia. She wasn't speaking to Micah. She was speaking to herself, to her past, to the woman who had forgotten where she came from. And for the first time in years, she felt the ground beneath her shift, not collapsing but clearing space. "Micah," she said softly, turning to him, "I need you to trust me a little longer. Today is the beginning of something bigger." He swallowed, looking between her and the twins. "Okay," he whispered. "Just don't leave us." Her eyes softened. "I won't," she said. And this time she meant it with her whole being. The past had finally demanded its reckoning. The present held 3 fragile lives inside one suite. And the future, uncertain, trembling, raw, was waiting for her to rebuild not just a family's life, but her own humanity, one true choice at a time. The day grew into itself slowly, like a child waking from an uneasy dream. Light strengthened across the suite, stretching into the corners that night had kept for itself. Outside, the river churned brown and restless, swollen from the storm. Inside, though, a different kind of storm was preparing to break. Quiet, deliberate, unavoidable. Evelyn sat at the dining table with the folder Nadia had brought. Pages lay scattered in front of her. Emails, eviction notices, rent increase proposals, inspection reports, legal memos, tenant complaints, unanswered requests. So many unanswered requests. Micah stood across from her, arms wrapped protectively around Leo, rocking him slowly as the baby blinked sleepily at the world. Luna lay in the crib with a pacifier, her tiny chest rising and falling with the delicate rhythm of new life. Nadia stood by the armchair, tablet tucked under her arm, eyes shifting between Evelyn and the documents. She looked calm on the outside, the way good assistants must, yet her knuckles whitened where they gripped the tablet. "This," Evelyn said finally, lifting a page with her own initials on it, "is worse than I imagined." Micah swallowed. "What does it say?" She hesitated. Not out of guilt, she'd already accepted that, but because explaining it meant acknowledging her past choices in ways that stripped away the last of her old armor. "It's a directive," she said slowly. "A recommendation to expedite tenant removal so renovations could begin sooner." Micah stared. "Tenant removal? A sanitized word for eviction," she clarified softly. "And you approved it?" "Yes." Silence. Micah's jaw tightened. He looked down at Leo, brushing a finger across the baby's cheek. "My sister begged them for time," he said. "She kept calling the manager. She kept saying she'd pay something, anything. They said her application was not viable." He swallowed. "Is that in there too?" Evelyn sifted through the stack until she found it. A complaint she'd never seen, logged, forwarded, never escalated. Marked low priority. Her file was flagged, Evelyn said quietly, holding out the paper. Not because she did anything wrong, but because she didn't make enough money to meet the revised standards. Micah laughed, sharp, bitter, painful. "Revised by whose standards?" "By mine." The words tasted like metal. He looked at her, eyes storm-dark but not hateful. Not yet. Just wounded. Disbelieving. Trying to grasp how the billionaire helping him today could be the same person whose signature had helped take everything from him yesterday. "So what happens now?" he asked, voice strained. "Are you going to make all this go away with money? Or bury it? Or pretend it didn't happen because you said sorry?" "No," she said instantly. "Nothing is being buried. Nothing is being erased. This," she gestured to the papers, to the letter, to the twins, "isn't something I fix with a check. This is something I fix with responsibility." Micah looked skeptical, but the part of him that wanted to believe stayed quiet, not leaving the room. "Sit," she said gently. He sat, Leo still nestled in his arms. Nadia sat too, sensing the gravity of what was about to unfold. Evelyn placed her palms flat on the table, grounding herself. "I'm going to walk you through exactly what we can do today. Not someday. Not after studies or committees. Today." Micah nodded warily. "First," she said, "I'm reinstating the Viridian Care Program in full. Effective immediately. No cuts. No restructuring. No waiting." Nadia blinked. This alone was massive. "Second," Evelyn continued, "I'm opening an emergency fund for displaced families from Riverside and any other building we've redeveloped in the last decade. They'll receive relocation assistance, back pay for moving costs, and guaranteed access to stable housing." Micah's eyes widened slightly, confusion flickering into a softer shape. "And third," Evelyn paused because this part mattered most. "Third, I'm hiring a legal team to review every eviction I ever approved under Viridian's redevelopment mandate. Every family will get a chance to have their case reopened, including yours. Micah stared at her, his chest rising with a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. And you, she said gently, are not going back to the street. You're not being sent to a group home. The twins aren't going to foster care unless you want them to be. I'll make sure you have what you need: food, housing, help. Real help. He slowly shook his head, trying to process a reality that was too kind compared to the one he came from. Why would you do all that? He whispered. Why for us? Evelyn didn't step away from the truth. Because the system failed you under my watch, she said. Because your sister asked for help, and her plea died in someone's inbox. Because this, she touched the letter, found me too late. And because I refused to allow that to be the end of her story. Micah's throat worked around a thick breath. It won't bring her back. No, she said. But it will honor her. He looked away, blinking fast. I don't know if I can forgive you, he whispered. Her heart tightened, but she nodded. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she said. I'm asking for the chance to be useful. He looked at her again. She didn't look like a billionaire then. She didn't look like the woman whose signature echoed through eviction hallways. She looked human, bare, trembling at the edges. Someone with the means to fix things finally choosing to use them. Nadia cleared her throat softly. There's something else you asked me to find, she reminded, her voice gentle. About Ava. Micah straightened, curious. Evelyn stiffened, caught off guard. You found something already? Yes. Nadia approached, handing her a document. You said to look into where she might be. I didn't dig deep, just traced a few public leads. I respected the boundaries. Evelyn took the paper, her hands trembling before she could stop them. A part of her had been terrified of this moment for years. Micah watched her carefully. Leo fussed lightly, as if sensing the tension. The document contained a simple line of information. Ava Marks, volunteer registered with Eastside Women's Homeless Outreach, serving displaced families and single mothers. Evelyn exhaled sharply, belief, grief, pride, and heartbreak all at once. She's helping people? Micah asked gently. Yes, Evelyn whispered. She's doing what I should have been doing. Micah studied her. Maybe she learned it by watching you, he said quietly. The statement stunned her. No, she whispered. She learned it in spite of me. But his words planted something. Something small, something tender, something terrifying, inside her. Hope. She folded the paper, holding it as if it were a living thing. Micah shifted Leo carefully, watching the twins, then the letter, then Evelyn. Do you think she'd want to meet us? He asked suddenly. The question struck Evelyn like a soft blow. Why do you ask? He shrugged awkwardly. She helps families. We're a family. Kind of. He looked at her meaningfully. And I think she'd want to know you're helping someone too. Emotion surged up her throat, so sudden she had to steady herself on the back of a chair. I pray you're right, she whispered. Then, because she had learned something important last night about action over promises, she straightened. Nadia, she said, call the outreach center. Ask for Ava. Don't tell them anything. Just ask if she's available. Nadia nodded immediately, stepping into the other room. Micah's voice was gentle. Are you ready? Evelyn's eyes shimmered. No, she said honestly. But I'm done waiting to be ready. The twins stirred again, small sounds of life threading through the heavy room. Micah leaned back against the chair and watched Evelyn with a new kind of understanding. Not trust, not yet, but possibility. You know, he murmured. My sister used to say storms bring people together who were never supposed to meet. Evelyn looked at him. She was right. Do you think she'd be happy about all this? He asked, motioning around the suite, to the crib, to the folder, to the future that had begun reshaping itself around them. Evelyn let her eyes drift to the letter again, the soft, rain-warped envelope that felt like an anchor and a compass at once. Yes, she said softly. I think she'd be very proud of you. And I think she'd expect me to do better. Micah nodded, absorbing the weight of that. Seemed to settle him. Okay, he whispered. Then let's keep going. Nadia appeared in the doorway, her face unreadable but her eyes wide with something like shock or fate or both. Evelyn, she said carefully. Ava's at the center. And she said she can speak now. The world tilted. Micah's grip tightened around Leo. And Evelyn Marks, billionaire, builder of empires, creator of storms and shelters alike, closed her eyes as the truth she'd long avoided finally came calling. Tell her I'm coming, she whispered. And just like that, the woman who had spent years building towers began preparing to step back into the one relationship she'd never. The world outside had brightened, but inside Evelyn's chest, a storm gathered, quiet, electric, trembling with 1,000 unspoken words she hadn't rehearsed. For years she prepared board presentations, confronted senators, negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions. Yet nothing felt as impossible as the thought of seeing her daughter again. She stood near the window, one hand pressed lightly against the glass. The river glimmered under a sun fighting to break through clouds, sending shimmering patterns across her reflection. Micah watched her carefully, holding Leo against his chest while Luna babbled softly in the crib. You look, he whispered. Scared. She let out a breath that felt like releasing a held-in truth. I am. Why? Because, she whispered. I've done every brave thing in business. But Ava, she's the one place I was a coward. Micah didn't know all the details yet, but he understood enough. He understood what it meant to be left. To be forgotten. To believe someone should have been there and wasn't. You going to run? He asked softly. The question startled her. Not insulted but humbled. No, she said. Not this time. He nodded once, the smallest gesture of respect. He didn't say he believed her. But he didn't doubt her either. It was a fragile middle ground, and somehow that meant more than blind trust. Nadia stepped forward, clearing her throat. The center is expecting us. I told them we'd be there within the hour. Evelyn's hand tightened on the window edge. Micah, would you like to come with me? The boy's eyes widened. He hadn't expected that. Not after everything, not after learning her role in the life he lost. Me? He asked, stunned. Yes, she said. You. The babies too. If Ava is working with families, she'll understand yours better than anyone. Micah seemed to search her face for any sign of performative charity, but he found none. This was not an image piece. Not a publicity stunt. This was a trembling mother trying to walk into a room she once failed to protect. He nodded slowly. If it's okay with you then yeah. I'll come. I want you there, she murmured. He looked down, a shy flush at the edge of his cheekbones. Leo's tiny hand gripped his hoodie string, as if casting his vote too. They began gathering the baby's things, the bottles, blankets, diapers, the small knitted caps the hotel had provided. Micah packed them with instinctive efficiency, the same skill born of necessity. Even now, even with comfort around him, he moved like someone preparing for the world to shift suddenly beneath him. Evelyn noticed. It pierced her. Micah, she said gently, you don't have to rush. His hands paused, then stilled. I just don't like wasting time. That's not what this is, she replied softly. This is us taking time. Not losing it. Swallowed. Then, for the first time, he let his movements be slow. Nadia helped too, holding the twins as needed, tucking supplies into a discreet hotel bag. She treated them with the kind of tenderness that wasn't loud or cloying, but practical, steady. Someone who knew how to move through emotional spaces without disrupting them. When everything was ready, Evelyn picked up Luna, fitting the baby against her side with surprising familiarity. Micah held Leo. The tiny family they formed in that moment, messy, tangled, unexpected, was nothing short of miraculous. Shall we? Evelyn whispered. Micah gave a small, brave nod. The elevator ride down felt longer than the night before. Evelyn's pulse pounded at her temple, each passing floor like a countdown she hadn't asked for. She held Luna close, inhaling her baby-sweet scent, letting the warmth calm something frayed inside her. Micah leaned into the elevator wall, Leo resting on his shoulder. His fingers drummed lightly against the baby's back, a nervous rhythm. You think she's going to be mad? He asked suddenly. Evelyn closed her eyes. Yes. Micah blinked. But anger, she added softly, is a sign she still cares. People stop being angry when they stop hoping. He absorbed that, gaze fixed on the glowing numbers above the door. You going to tell her about us? Yes, she said. But only what you're comfortable with. He nodded. I want her to know my sister wasn't a bad mom. She didn't have a chance. She'll know, Evelyn promised. I'll make sure she does. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the ground floor. The lobby was quieter than the night before, but eyes watched them still, the billionaire woman holding a child, the teenage boy holding another. No one whispered. No one asked questions. But curiosity held its breath. Philip, the doorman, stepped forward, expression carefully neutral. Car is ready, Ms. Marks. Thank you, Philip. He opened the door. She stepped out. Micah followed. And for a moment, just a moment, she felt the world tilt gently, as if acknowledging the courage in this simple walk across polished marble. The sedan waited at the curb, warmed and ready. Micah climbed in first, settling Leo in a carrier seat borrowed from the hotel's family supply. Evelyn slid in next to him, placing Luna carefully in her lap until she could secure her in the other seat. You ever been to this outreach center? Micah asked. No, she said. But I've passed it 100 times. And never went in? She looked out the window, watching the city blur past. No. I wasn't the kind of woman who walked into places that reminded her of who she used to be. But you're going now. Yes, she whispered. I am. The center was on East Side Avenue, nestled between a laundromat and a community bakery painted with murals of flowers and children flying kites. Estetiers with strollers, elderly women carrying grocery bags, volunteers in green vests offering warm smiles and pamphlets. Micah tensed the moment the car slowed. You okay? She asked gently. He nodded, but his grip tightened around Leo's tiny leg. Places like this, they don't always like boys hanging around. They think we cause trouble. You're with me, she said. And you belong everywhere I step. His eyes glistened at that. Not with awe, but with relief so fragile it nearly broke her. The car stopped. The driver stepped out, opening the door. Evelyn's heartbeat hammered in her throat. The center's entrance loomed closer. People milled around, chatting, smiling, seeking help. Children tugged at their mothers' sleeves. Volunteers carried boxes of donations. A mural on the brick wall showed a woman holding a child beneath a tree, painted in bright, hopeful colors. Evelyn stepped out of the car with Luna in her arms. Micah stepped out behind her with Leo. Nadia walked beside them. And the moment Evelyn's heels touched the pavement, she felt it, an ache so deep it nearly buckled her. This was the place where her daughter chose to build the life she couldn't find with her. They walked toward the entrance. Each step felt heavier than any bored decision she'd ever made. Micah brushed his hand along Leo's back, grounding himself. Nadia whispered, You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be honest. Evelyn nodded. The door opened before they reached it. A volunteer stepped out, tall, warm smile, clipboard in hand, but Evelyn barely registered her. Her eyes shifted past the doorway, and then she saw her. Ava. She was sorting donated coats in the lobby, sleeves rolled up, hair pulled back in a messy knot, wearing jeans and a simple gray sweater flecked with lint from winter jackets. She looked older than Evelyn remembered, not aged but grown. Grounded. Strong in the way people become when they stop waiting for help and learn to give it instead. Her daughter. Her breath caught. Ava glanced up casually at first, then froze. Recognition hit like a quiet lightning strike. Her eyes widened, disbelief flooding them, followed by something much sharper. Hurt, anger, abandonment, love, fear, all at once. Mom, she whispered. Evelyn's knees nearly buckled. Micah stepped closer to her instinctively, as if grounding the moment. Ava took one step forward, tentative, trembling, then another. Her hands began to shake. Mom, why are you here? The question cracked the air. Evelyn's eyes stung. Her voice trembled. I came, she whispered, because I finally understood what I lost. Ava blinked rapidly, tears threatening. Why now? Because someone showed me what happens when you don't choose your family. Ava looked at Micah. At the babies. At her mother holding one of them. Micah answered, voice small but steady. We're a family she found in the rain. Ava's eyes fell on the twin babies, softening with instinctive tenderness that made Evelyn's heart ache. And then finally Ava's gaze returned to her mother. You came to the one place I thought you'd never come, she whispered. I know, Evelyn said, voice shaking. But I'm here. I'm ready to face everything I ran from. Ava stepped closer. Then, heartbreakingly soft. Are you here to stay this time? The world held its breath. Evelyn didn't hesitate. Yes, she whispered. For you. And for them. And for every mistake I need to fix. Ava's tears finally spilled. She reached out, not fully embracing, not yet, but touching her mother's arm like someone testing the temperature of truth. Micah watched them, hope trembling in his eyes. And in that small trembling touch, mother to daughter, the storm that had lived between them for years finally began to break. Act 9. The lobby of the Outreach Center seemed to exhale around them, as if the very walls recognized the weight of a reunion years in the making. People moved in soft murmurs, children wove between volunteers. The scent of donated jackets and freshly brewed coffee hung in the air. Yet everything beyond the small circle formed by Evelyn, Ava, Micah, and the twins faded into a gentle blur, secondary to the trembling truth unfolding between mother and daughter. Ava's fingers still rested lightly on Evelyn's arm. Not a full embrace. Not forgiveness. But contact. A bridge where there had once been a canyon. Evelyn stood motionless, afraid to breathe too deep and break the fragile moment. Why now? Ava whispered again, voice quivering with questions her heart had been storing for years. Evelyn looked into her daughter's eyes and saw a lifetime of unspoken midnights, birthdays missed, promises abandoned, the small griefs of a child learning to lower her expectations for the sake of survival. She saw the resilience Ava had crafted from those empty spaces. She saw everything she had lost by believing time could be rescheduled like a meeting. I didn't come here today to ask anything of you, Evelyn said. I didn't come for forgiveness or for a second chance I haven't earned. I came because I finally understood the cost of choosing ambition over the people who needed me most. Ava swallowed hard, chest rising beneath her gray sweater. And what made you understand that? Micah shifted awkwardly, stepping back a little as Leo nuzzled against his shoulder. He knew this wasn't just their story anymore. He knew he was standing inside someone else's fragile history. Evelyn glanced at him, then back to Ava. Because last night, I met someone who paid the price for decisions I made without thinking of people who lived behind the numbers. Ava's brows knit with confusion and concern. What do you mean? Before Evelyn could answer, one of the outreach coordinators, a woman with warm brown skin and the kind of eyes that naturally soften toward children, stepped forward. Ava? Everything okay? Ava inhaled shakily, not breaking eye contact with her mother. I need a minute. The coordinator nodded, stepping back with quiet understanding. Evelyn shifted Luna slightly, the baby's small hand curling around her blouse. Can we sit? She asked. Ava hesitated, then nodded, guiding them toward a quiet corner where donated chairs formed a makeshift seating area. She sat first, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Evelyn sat across from her, Luna still nestled against her. Micah sat beside Evelyn, Leo tucked against him, eyes darting nervously between mother and daughter. Ava glanced at him, then at the twins. They're beautiful, she murmured. How old? 3 months, Micah said softly. Ava's eyes softened with instinctive compassion. They look healthy. You're doing amazing. Micah's throat worked around a lump. No one had told him that before. Not once in 3 months of struggle. Thanks, he whispered. Ava smiled gently, then turned back to Evelyn, the softness fading into something heavier. So who are they to you? She asked. Evelyn drew in a shaky breath. Last night, I found Micah in the rain. He was alone with the babies. They'd been evicted. They'd lost their mother. He was trying to keep them alive in a world that didn't care. Ava's eyes widened. In the rain? Yes. Ava leaned back, exhaling sharply. Why didn't he go to a shelter? A hospital? CPS. Micah's voice was barely audible. I tried. They said they didn't have room. Or that I wasn't old enough to make decisions. Or that they'd have to separate us. Ava's face twisted with pain. And you couldn't risk that. No. She swallowed, nodding slowly. I understand. Evelyn looked at her daughter. Micah and the twins were living in a building Viridian redeveloped. Ava blinked. Recognition flickered in her eyes. Not of the name but of the pattern. I've worked with families from those buildings, she said slowly. Desperate families. Displaced families. I didn't know that I was the one behind them, Evelyn finished gently. Ava looked down at her hands. Hurt flickered across her face. Old hurt renewed by fresh contexts. Mom, I walked away because I didn't want to be an afterthought. Because you were always everywhere except where I needed you. And I rebuilt myself in places where your name felt like a cold shadow over people who didn't have the luxury of being strong all the time. Evelyn bowed her head. You were right to walk away. Ava's gaze shot up, startled by the honesty. I wasn't a good mother, Evelyn admitted. I tried to build an empire to protect us both but became a casualty of my ambition. Ava's lips trembled. I don't want an apology, she whispered. I don't know what to do with this version of you. The one who admits she was wrong. Evelyn's voice broke. Maybe start by understanding that I'm learning to be someone better. Ava looked at her long and hard, evaluating, testing, searching through years of disappointment for something real. After a long silence, she spoke. Why did you bring them here with you? Micah straightened, prepared to explain, but Evelyn gently lifted a hand. Because my daughter works with people who needed me but never got me. Because I thought if there was anyone in the world who might understand their story, it would be you. A tear slipped down Ava's cheek, but she didn't look away. And because I don't want to walk into your life empty-handed, Evelyn whispered. I want to walk in doing good, learning from you, standing beside you instead of above you. Ava blinked quickly, tears gathering. Her voice cracked. Why couldn't you do that when I was young? The question sliced through the room, quiet, devastating. Evelyn didn't look away. Because I thought success could fill the space where love belonged. I was wrong. Ava finally looked at Micah, really looked at him. Can I hold one of them? Micah froze for half a second, then nodded. Carefully, he lifted Leo and extended him toward her. Ava held the infant with a steadiness born of experience, her arms instinctively curling around him. Leo blinked up at her, tiny mouth forming a soft O of curiosity. Ava's expression melted. Hi, sweetheart, she whispered. You're safe now. Micah's eyes glistened. No adult had said that to the babies since the day they were born. Evelyn watched her daughter, watched the gentleness, the capability, the compassion her daughter had fostered in the spaces she herself had abandoned. It broke her heart. It mended it too. You're good with them, Micah murmured. Ava smiled faintly. I volunteer for childcare shifts here. Kids trust me. Somehow. She brushed a fingertip across Leo's cheek. These two, they're fighters. Yes, Evelyn whispered. Like their brother. Ava looked up at her mother. You're helping them? Yes, Evelyn said. As much as they'll let me. Ava studied her again. That's different. I'm trying to be, Evelyn whispered. Ava nodded slowly, cradling the baby closer. What exactly do you need from me? Nothing, Evelyn said. I didn't come to ask you for anything. I came to show you something, to show you that I'm finally choosing people over profits. Ava looked down at Leo, then back at her mother. Maybe, Ava whispered. Maybe that's something. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reunion. It wasn't a solved past. But it was a thread, spoken for years, and was now being rewoven strand by trembling strand. Micah shifted beside Evelyn, voice quiet. Do you want to meet the twins together? Like as a family? Ava's breath caught. Evelyn's heart squeezed, hope and fear mingling in equal measure. Yes, Ava whispered. I think I'd like that. They moved into a small sitting room at the back of the center, where the noise softened and light filtered through old, hand-painted windows. The four of them gathered around the babies, one mother, one daughter, one boy who had been forced to become a man too soon, and two infants who represented a future that none of them had expected but all of them had been changed by. For the first time in the entire story, they formed a circle, not of blood but of need, history, pain, and possibility. And Evelyn knew with the clarity of truth falling like light through cracked glass, that this moment, this fragile beginning, was greater than any tower she had ever built. Ava stroked Luna's tiny hand, watching her mother carefully. So what happens next? She asked quietly. Evelyn exhaled, steadying the tremor in her voice. Next we build. Together. Whatever that looks like. Whatever time allows. Whatever you're willing to give. Ava didn't smile. But she didn't look away. That's a start, she whispered. The room felt warmer then. Still heavy with unresolved years, but filled with the faint, undeniable glow of something reborn. Possibility. Healing. A beginning that didn't erase the past but refused to repeat it. Outside, the sun finally broke through the clouds, casting soft gold across the room, illuminating the babies' faces, the tired lines under Micah's eyes, the tentative softness in Ava's, and the trembling resolve etched into Evelyn's. They did not hug. They did not say everything. They simply stayed there together, letting the light touch them all. And for the first time in years, Evelyn felt the quiet, profound truth of a moment she had almost forgotten how to recognize. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. For a long time they didn't move. The little room at the back of the center held them like cupped hands, for lives drawn together by storms of their own making and storms they never asked for. The twins shifted in their blankets, Leo drumming a tiny heel against Ava's wrist, Luna snuffling softly in Micah's lap. The light through the stained glass window spilled green and gold across the floor, painting quiet halos where none of them felt holy enough to stand. It was Ava who broke the stillness. "We have a support office down the hall," she said, voice steadier now, the professional tone she'd grown into wrapping itself over the frayed edges of the daughter underneath. "They deal with housing, legal aid, emergency care. This is a lot for the lobby." Evelyn nodded, grateful for the structure. "Lead the way." They moved together, not in step but not separate either. Ava in front, holding Leo with practiced ease. Micah just behind her, Luna held against his chest for a moment while Evelyn gathered the folder Nadia had brought. The older woman's hand shook as she snapped it closed. She had carried portfolios worth billions with less fear. The support office was small and crowded, all metal filing cabinets, old computers and whiteboards layered with overlapping lists. Food drive outreach routes, names circled in red as urgent. A coffee mug sat abandoned near a stack of forms, lipstick print fading on the rim. Someone here had been interrupting their own exhaustion to organize other people's. Ava set Leo gently into a portable bassinet tucked in the corner, then motioned for them to sit. "I can't fix everything from this room," she admitted, "but I know where the cracks are. And I know who falls through them." Evelyn looked at her daughter and understood. This place was all the things she had once tried to build in concrete and glass, except this time it was made of people, not profits. Micah perched on the plastic chair like he expected it to throw him off. Luna slept in his arms, lips parted in a tiny, steady breath. He stared around the office at the posters on the wall, hotlines, tenant rights, shelter locations, like they were maps to a world he had never been invited into. "You're not in trouble," Ava told him, reading his posture. "You're not here because you did something wrong. You're here because the world did." Micah's eyes glistened. "Feels like I did something wrong just by existing," he murmured. "That's what bad systems teach you." Her gaze hardened, not at him but at the papers covering the desk. "We're going to unlearn that." Evelyn watched pride and grief twist together inside her, a rope she wasn't sure how to untangle. Ava had taken the ache of being unseen and turned it into a talent for seeing everyone else. It was beautiful. It was devastating. A caseworker joined them, Marisol, mid-30s, tired eyes warmed by a tired smile. It took only a few minutes of listening for her to understand the shape of this story. The eviction, the death, the rain, the hotel, the revelation of who Evelyn was. Most people flinched when they realized they were sitting across from a billionaire whose name appeared on buildings. Marisol didn't. She looked at Evelyn for a long beat, then simply said, "If you're the one who signed some of these orders, good. Now you can help untangle them." No worship. No fear. Just a clear-eyed assessment of cause and effect. It was oddly merciful. They began to trace the contours of a new life for Micah and the twins, not in vague promises but in concrete steps. Emergency guardianship that recognized him as their primary caregiver. A temporary apartment close to the center, paid for by an account Evelyn opened on the spot. Access to pediatric care. A checkup for Micah himself. Enrollment forms for a bridge program that would let him finish school without dropping the role he'd been forced to assume overnight. "And what about long-term?" Marisol asked, pen hovering over a line that read, "Future plan. What happens when the attention fades? When the cameras," she glanced at Evelyn, "if there ever are cameras, move on." Evelyn met her gaze without flinching. "There will be no cameras," she said. "This isn't a PR strategy. It's penance." She paused. And long term, I intend to be involved. Financially, legally, personally, if they'll let me. Micah looked up sharply. Personally. If you want that, she added quickly. I won't push myself into your life. But I don't want to be another rich stranger who signs something once and disappears. He studied her for a long moment. The letter his sister had written lay on the desk between them, a rain-warped bridge between their histories. I don't know what I want yet, he admitted. I just know I'm tired of being alone in rooms like this. Ava's hand moved without thinking, resting gently on his shoulder. You're not alone now, she said. Whether or not you ever want anything to do with her. She glanced at her mother, then back. You've got us. This place. Me. Micah nodded, jaw tightening as he swallowed another rush of emotion. That's new, he whispered. New. The word sat in the air like the first green leaf after a hard winter. The next hours unfolded in practical tasks that somehow felt sacred, signatures on real forms, not just corporate approvals, numbers entered into systems designed to protect, not displace, phone calls made not to secure an advantage but to secure a home. Outside, the city moved on with its usual impatience. Inside, time slowed, allowing these small acts to accumulate into something larger than any of them could measure in the moment. By late afternoon, the immediate pieces were in place. Micah had an address. The babies had appointments. There was a crib being delivered, a grocery cart loaded, a follow-up meeting scheduled. They stepped out of the office into the main hall, where the noise of the center wrapped around them again. Cries of children, laughter, tired voices asking for help in getting it, at least in pieces. Micah held the new apartment keys in his hand, turning them over like unfamiliar coins. Feels weird, he said. Going somewhere that's mine. Ours. Without having to lie or beg. You didn't steal this, Ava told him. You're not lucky. You're owed. He shook his head faintly. Still feels like a miracle. Sometimes justice feels that way, Evelyn murmured. They walked outside together. The clouds had finally broken. The sky held that freshly washed blue that only appears after a storm has finished saying everything it needed to say. Puddles glittered in the cracks of the sidewalk. Cars hissed past on wet roads. The air smelled like rain and exhaust and bread from the bakery. The ordinary scent of a city afterward. On the curb, the sedan waited. For the first time since she'd bought it, the car looked less like a status symbol and more like what it actually was, a vehicle. A way to move people from one version of their life into another. Come, Evelyn said. We'll take you to your new place. Micah hesitated. You've done enough. I don't want to take more. There is no enough yet, she said. There is only next. He searched her face, found no impatience, only tired resolve, and finally nodded. Ava turned toward the center. I still have a few more hours, she said. I have to stay. People are waiting. I know, Evelyn said. The response came with a sting of bittersweet pride. I'll drop him off. Then if you ever want to come by, you'll know where to find us. Us. Ava repeated. Viridian, Evelyn said. And me. The version of me that's trying to be worth finding. Something flickered across Ava's face. Not forgiveness, not yet. But not rejection either. How about, Ava said slowly, you come back here instead? Evelyn blinked. Here, yes. Ava's gaze was steady. You want to do better? Start where the cracks are. Volunteer. Listen. Use your name to get people in offices I can't. Bring your board to this lobby instead of to your conference rooms. Let the change start where the damage fell. Evelyn felt something settle inside her, like a compass finally taking a true reading. Yes, she said. The word came out not as concession, but as a vow. I'll come back. Often. And I'll bring whoever needs to stand in this room until they understand what we've done. Ava nodded, satisfaction and sorrow braided together. Then we'll see. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a plan. It was a door not fully closed. For now it was enough. Ava reached into the bassinet, lifted Leo one last time, pressed a kiss to his forehead. Be good, she whispered. You're starting a new story. She handed him back to Micah. Their fingers brushed, a quiet transference of trust. Take care of them, she said. I will, he replied. Their eyes met. Two young souls shouldering burdens their elders had crafted and failed to carry. For a moment, solidarity passed between them like a current. Then Ava turned to her mother. They stood face to face, nothing between them but years of unfinished sentences. Evelyn opened her mouth, closed it again, then finally said the simplest thing that was true. "I am proud of you," she whispered. Ava's eyes filled. "You don't know half of what I've done." "I don't need to," Evelyn replied. "I can see it." A tear escaped. Ava swiped it away quickly, a little annoyed at herself. "I'm not ready for lunches," she said. "Or holidays." Or replied. "I'm just grateful to be allowed to stand in your doorway again." Ava exhaled. Then carefully, she stepped forward and did something neither of them had prepared for. She reached up and straightened the collar of her mother's blazer. It was such a small gesture, but it carried all the weight of 1,000 undone acts of care. "Then start here," she whispered. "We'll see what grows." Evelyn's vision blurred. "Okay," she managed. She stepped backward, not trusting herself to say anything else. Micah and the twins were already at the car, the new keys still clutched in his fist. Nadia stood nearby, speaking quietly into her phone, already spinning calls into opportunities for repair. As the sedan pulled away from the curb, Evelyn looked back through the window. Ava still stood outside the center, one hand lifted in a small, almost uncertain wave. Evelyn lifted her own hand, palm pressed to the glass, an unfinished greeting stretched between them. Then the car turned the corner, and the outreach center slid out of sight. They drove in a silence that wasn't awkward, just full. The kind of silence that comes when too much has been said and not enough all at once. Micah watched the city pass by. For the first time, the buildings with Viridian on them didn't look like threats. They looked like questions. "What happens to all those people?" he asked suddenly, nodding toward a high-rise. "The ones in other buildings you changed. The ones who didn't meet you in the rain." Evelyn's fingers tightened around her bag. "We find them," she said. "Not all at once. Not as fast as they deserve. But we try. We look at the lists as if they're lives, not losses. We build something that doesn't push them out." He nodded slowly. "You really think you can change all that?" "No," she said. "Not alone. Not completely. But I can change what I'm responsible for. And I can make it very expensive politically and financially for anyone who wants to keep pretending people are collateral." Micah considered that. "My sister would have liked that," he murmured. "She always said if she had money, she'd use it to annoy all the people who thought they were better than everyone." Evelyn laughed, a short, surprised sound that felt like water running over dry stone. "Then I'll try to annoy them in her honor." They reached the new apartment building, modest, clean, the kind of place that didn't make the news but quietly became the backdrop of people's lives. No marble lobby, no concierge, just a stairwell that smelled faintly of detergent and frying onions from a neighbor's kitchen. They climbed together, carrying babies and bags and things too heavy to pack. On the third floor, they reached the door with his number on it. Micah stared at it for a long time. "Go on," she said softly. He slid the key into the lock, turned it. The door opened onto a small living room with plain walls, a sagging but serviceable couch, a kitchenette, 2 small bedrooms. Someone, probably Marisol's team, had left a bag of groceries on the counter, a pack of diapers by the door, a handwritten note that read, "Welcome home." Micah stepped inside and laughed, a shaky, disoriented little sound that broke halfway through and turned into a sob. He pressed his hand against the wall, leaning into it like he needed to feel something solid hold him up. "It's not huge," he said, voice cracking. "But it's ours." "Ours," Evelyn repeated. He turned around, blinking tears from his lashes. "Will you come back?" he asked softly. "To visit? Not just as the lady who helped once." "If you want me to," she said. He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, think I'd like that. For them to know you." "Them? The babies," he said. "And me. I had a mom once. She tried. Then you showed up when everything was breaking. I don't know what that makes you yet." He swallowed. "But I think it makes you something." She couldn't answer for a moment. Her throat was too tight. "I'll come," she said finally. "Not as a billionaire. Just as Evelyn." He nodded again, satisfied. They set up the crib together. It did not require a board vote. They assembled it with clumsy hands and tired jokes. The twins lay side by side, staring at the ceiling like it was the most intricate painting they'd ever seen. "Welcome home," Micah whispered to them. Evelyn watched, her heart full and aching and strangely light. Later, as she stood in his doorway ready to leave, she looked back at the small apartment, the bags on the counter, the worn couch, the light falling across the crib. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, the words meant for Micah, for his sister, for Ava, for every tenant file she'd never read. "I know," Micah said quietly. "Just don't let sorry be the end." "It won't be," she promised. She stepped into the hallway. On the way back to the car, she stopped halfway down the stairs and pressed her hand to the cool rail. For decades she had climbed toward the top of the city, always up, 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 believing altitude was the same thing as safety. Now, rooted in the middle of a nondescript stairwell in a building without her name on it, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Not the kind that shimmered in press releases. The kind that breathed in shared spaces and second chances. Over the weeks that followed, the work began in earnest. Viridian Care reopened its books. This time, they were written in people's names instead of line items. Tenants received calls they'd stopped expecting, invitations to review their cases, offers of restitution and relocation. Board members protested. Lawyers cautioned. Investors fretted about optics and precedent. Evelyn listened to them all, then took them to the outreach center and sat them in the lobby, told them to an hour before offering an opinion. Some left changed. Some left angry. But none left ignorant. Micah's apartment slowly transformed from a fragile refuge into a home. A second-hand bookshelf appeared, filled partly with donated children's books and partly with the worn novels his sister had left behind. He enrolled in a flexible study program, taking classes in the mornings while volunteers from the center watched the twins. In the afternoons, he worked part-time at the bakery next door to the outreach center, trading loaves for stories with the owner. Sometimes in the evenings, Evelyn would visit. She never arrived empty-handed. Sometimes she brought diapers and formula. Sometimes she brought nothing but time. She'd sit on the floor and let Leo tug at her necklace while Luna tried to grab her hair, and Micah would tell her about the latest thing he'd learned in class. "You know what compound interest is?" he asked once, eyes alight. "It's like money growing on memory." "Then let's make sure we remember differently," she replied. She and Ava did not heal overnight. There were weeks when they didn't speak. Days when messages went unanswered. Times when one of them would walk into a room, and the other's body would tense with the muscle memory of past hurt. But then there were moments. The first time Evelyn showed up to volunteer at the center, sleeves rolled up, sitting on the floor in the kids' corner reading picture books to a ring of sticky, curious faces, Ava stood in the doorway and watched unseen. Something in her posture softened. The first time a family whose case went back 5 years held keys in trembling hands thanks to a new fund Evelyn had insisted on creating, Ava called her, not to say thank you but to say, that mattered. The first time they sat together on a cracked bench outside the center, coffee cups between them, evening settling over their shoulders like an old coat, Ava said quietly, "You were a good woman in the wrong rooms." "And you?" Evelyn asked. "I was a hurting girl in the right ones," Ava said. "Maybe we can switch places a little." And slowly, like rain filling a dry riverbed, their relationship began to move again. Not as it once was, that version was gone, but as something new shaped by honesty instead of pretense. Months later, on a night when the sky was once again bruised with clouds and the scent of rain was heavy in the air, Evelyn sat by her penthouse window, this time not above the storm but inside it. Her phone buzzed. It was a picture from Micah. The twins sitting on the floor of their apartment, faces smeared with something that might once have been pasta, grinning wide at the camera. Between them lay a crumpled drawing in crayon, for figures too big, too small. Underneath, in careful, uncertain letters, someone had written, U.S. Evelyn's vision went blurry. Another message came through. From Ava this time, board meeting tomorrow? Bring the file on tenant repairs. And bring lunch. The cheap sandwiches from the corner shop. None of that catered nonsense. Evelyn smiled. "Yes, boss," she replied. She set the phone down, looked out at the city. The Viridian buildings still shone. They were not absolved by anything she'd done. But their light no longer blinded her to the darkness at their base. Her empire hadn't shrunk. It had been repurposed, reoriented. reclaimed from the quiet cruelty of neutrality. When the first drops of rain hit the glass, she didn't turn away. She watched them. And somewhere, on a corner not too far from the Viridian riverfront, another boy in another hoodie walked past a woman in a coat. She stopped, asked his name, handed him a card for the outreach center with a handwritten note on the back. "Tell them Evelyn sent you. They'll know what to do." Maybe that boy would show up. Maybe he wouldn't. But the doors were open now. And the woman who once believed her power lived in glass towers now understood it lived in something far quieter. The willingness to stay in the room when someone else's truth was heavier than her comfort. She was a billionaire with everything, until a boy with twin babies stopped her in the rain. That night didn't strip her of her wealth. It stripped her of her excuses. It taught her that empires can be built from steel and stone, but the only ones that matter are built from second chances and chosen responsibilities. Years from now, when the twins could walk and the scars of Riverside had turned into stories told at tables instead of whispered in fear, people would ask how it all began. And somewhere between the rain and the letter, between the girl who ran away and the mother who finally walked back through the right door, the truth would be simple. Sometimes life does not send you angels. It sends you wet shoes, a scared boy, and 2 crying babies on a street you were never supposed to drive down. And if you're willing to stop, really stop, you may find that the storm you were avoiding was the one that came to wash you clean. She was a billionaire with everything, until a boy with twin babies stopped her in the rain. But in the end, it wasn't the storm that changed her. It was the way their tiny hands reached for her without knowing her past. And the way she reached back, knowing she could finally choose differently. Some lives collide by accident. Some by grace. And some, like hers, are rebuilt the moment you decide you're no longer afraid to face the truth.